Some cars weren't built just to drive. They were built to shock, to dazzle, and sometimes to confuse. These weren't your average machines. They were rolling science experiments, packed with so much innovation that even their own mechanics were left scratching their heads. From luxury limos that needed jet engineers to repair, to sports cars with more computers than a 90s NASA lab, these vehicles didn't just push boundaries, they obliterated them. But here's the twist. Some of these mechanical marvels were brilliant. Others, beautiful disasters. Today, we're counting down the most overengineered, overcomplicated, and absolutely outrageous cars ever built. Machines that dared to be different, even if it meant defying common sense. Presented in chronological order, this list might just change the way you look at too much tech. Let's start with a car that turned your average Sunday cruise into a full-blown mechanical symphony. One Ford Fairlane 500 Skyliner, 1957. Back in 1957, the world had never seen anything like the Ford Fairlane 500 Skyliner. It didn't just drop its top like other convertibles. It folded itself up like a mechanical magician. This wasn't just a car with a retractable roof. It was a full-blown robot disguised as a family coupe. To make the hardtop disappear into the trunk, Ford loaded the Skyliner with 7 electric motors for lift jacks, 10 solenoids, 10 limit switches for locking mechanisms, and over 600 feet of electrical wiring, all in an era when most cars barely had working radios. And this wasn't some prototype or limited showpiece. It went into mass production. For owners, it was both jaw-dropping and nerve-wracking. One button could transform the car, or jam halfway and leave the roof midair like a frozen stage trick. But for 1957, this was revolutionary. The kind of engineering that turned driveways into tech showcases. And as wild as that sounds, the next car on this list took its innovation even deeper, hiding radical ideas under a conservative British skin. 2. Rover P6, 1963. At first glance, the Rover P6 looked like a polite, well-mannered British sedan, the kind of car your history teacher might drive. But underneath that modest exterior was a Frankenstein's lab of innovation. Designed from the start to house a gas turbine engine. Yes, the kind you'd expect in a jet, the P6 was anything but ordinary. That plan didn't pan out, but Rover kept the wild engineering anyway. It featured unstressed bolt-on body panels instead of traditional welded construction, making repairs theoretically easier, unless you were actually the one doing them. The front suspension? A bizarre bell crank system unlike anything else on the road. And when the turbine dream died, they shoehorned in a 3.5-liter V8 instead, because why not add more chaos to the mix? Driving one felt futuristic. Fixing one? A nightmare. Yet the Rover P6 was years ahead of its time, a strange blend of ambition and overkill. It's the kind of car that whispers, "Don't judge a book by its cover or a British sedan by its trim." But while Rover was experimenting with future tech, Mercedes was building a monster of mechanical luxury that made even world leaders sit up and take notice. 3. Mercedes-Benz 600 1964. If power had a parking space, it probably looked like the Mercedes-Benz 600. This wasn't just a car, it was a rolling throne room. When dictators, rock stars, and royalty needed to make an entrance, this was the machine they chose.
Why?
Because the 600 wasn't built. It was engineered to dominate. Underneath its sleek exterior was a fortress of technology. It had air suspension that made the ride feel like floating on velvet, twin heating systems to keep passengers cozy in any climate. And nearly every feature, from the windows to the seats to the sunroof, was operated by a complex hydraulic system that ran at 2,200 psi. This thing had more plumbing than some houses. It even boasted Bosch fuel injection at a time when carburetors were still the norm, a move so ahead of its time, it baffled most mechanics for decades. Driving one was effortless. Maintaining one? Painful. Today, even seasoned restorers flinch at the mention of a 600. Not because it's unreliable, but because fixing it requires a PhD in German engineering and a millionaire's budget. It was the ultimate symbol of overengineering, precise, excessive, and unapologetically complex. But as Mercedes flexed its luxury muscles, The racetrack was birthing something even crazier. A car with two engines, stacked like a mechanical sandwich. 4. BRM H16 Lotus 43, 1966. This next machine didn't just push the limits of racing tech, it blew right past them into madness. Meet the BRM H16, the engine that powered the equally infamous Lotus 43. Now imagine this. 2 flat, 8 engines, yes, 2 full engines, stacked on top of each other, each with its own crankshaft, connected by gears to run in harmony. That's not engineering. That's mechanical sorcery. The result was a massive, 16-cylinder behemoth shaped like an H when viewed from the front, hence the name H16. Lotus, always hungry for innovation, crammed it into their Formula One car. It was fast, no doubt. The engine made all the right noises and even powered Jim Clark to a Grand Prix win in 1966. But that's where the glory ended. The H16 was insanely heavy, temperamental, and nearly impossible to work on. Teams dreaded opening the hood. Just changing a spark plug felt like defusing a bomb. It was the kind of engine that looked brilliant on paper and like a bad decision everywhere else. After one lonely win, the H16 was quietly abandoned, leaving behind a legacy of what-if genius and mechanical heartbreak. But while racing engineers were going for broke, the French were busy creating a car that felt like it was part spaceship, part sculpture, and all complexity. 5. Citroën SM, 1970. The Citroën SM wasn't just a car. It was a cross-continental love affair between French flair and Italian firepower. When Citroën bought Maserati in 1968, their goal was clear: blend smooth French innovation with raw Italian speed. What they created in 1970 was nothing short of otherworldly. The SM looked like a spaceship and drove like nothing else on Earth. Under the hood, a high-revving Maserati V6. But that was just the beginning. It came loaded with hydropneumatic suspension, variable assist power steering, self-centering steering, power-assisted brakes, and swiveling headlights that turned with the wheel, all controlled by a complex web of hydraulics. Driving it felt like piloting a sci-fi machine. It hovered over bumps, whispered through corners, and made everything else on the road feel primitive. But the price of brilliance? Fragility. The SM systems were delicate, expensive, and often misunderstood outside of France. Mechanics dreaded the sight of one pulling into the shop. Still, the SM wasn't just advanced, it was visionary. A rolling concept car you could actually buy if you had the patience of a saint and the budget of a banker. And if you think that was bold, Citroën wasn't done yet. Their next experiment would ditch pistons altogether and embrace an engine type that most carmakers feared to touch. 6. Citroën Birotor, 1973. Just when you thought Citroën couldn't get any bolder, they went and built a car with no pistons at all. Enter the Citroën Birotor, a rare, rotary-powered oddity born from a risky partnership with German manufacturer NSU. Based on the humble GS sedan, Citroën swapped out the regular engine for a twin-rotor Wankel engine, betting big on the future of rotary technology. And on paper, it worked. The Birotor was smoother, faster, and more refined than its piston-powered siblings. It even handled better thanks to its low center of gravity. But then reality hit hard. The 1973 oil crisis sent fuel prices soaring, and rotary engines were notorious gas guzzlers. Combine that with high production costs and reliability concerns, and Citroën had a PR nightmare on their hands. Worried the Birotor would stain the brand's reputation, Peugeot, who had just taken control of Citroën, killed it off almost immediately. In fact, they didn't just stop production. They bought back most of the Birotors and scrapped them, trying to erase the car from history. Only a few hundred survive today, making it one of the rarest production cars ever built. The Birotor wasn't just over-engineered, it was almost erased. But while Citroën was quietly burying its rotary experiment, Aston Martin was designing a luxury car that looked like it came from another galaxy. 7. Aston Martin Laganda, 1976. If the 1970s were the age of analog, the Aston Martin Laganda came from the next century. This wasn't just a luxury sedan, it looked like a spaceship and tried to function like one too. Unveiled in 1976, the Laganda didn't just turn heads, it left people speechless. Its angular, wedge-shaped body looked like something out of a sci-fi movie. But the real madness was inside. It featured digital LED displays, touch-sensitive controls, and a dashboard so futuristic it made regular cars look prehistoric. At a time when most cars still had analog clocks and simple knobs, the Lagonda's cockpit felt like it was stolen from a spaceship prototype. But there was one big problem. Almost none of it worked reliably. The electronics were developed in-house by Aston Martin, a company known for hand-built engines, not computers. The result? Frequent failures, sky-high repair bills, and a tech system so delicate that even minor fixes were a nightmare. Aston eventually tried to simplify the design in later models, but the damage was already done. Only 645 Lagondas were ever sold, and many were plagued with constant glitches. It was a bold vision of the future, one that arrived too early, too fast, and without a reliable blueprint. But while Aston Martin was dreaming in digital, Buick was trying to go high-tech too, just with a much smaller budget and a very American twist. 8. Buick Reatta, 1988. In the late 80s, Buick decided it was time to shake off its conservative image and get, well, futuristic. The result was the Buick Riotta, a sleek, hand-built coupe that aimed to be a high-tech halo car for a brand better known for grandpas and golf carts. And you know what? It actually looked pretty sharp. But the real draw was inside. The Riotta came equipped with a digital instrument cluster and, more impressively, a touchscreen computer interface called the Electronic Control Center. In 1988, you could adjust the climate, control the radio, and even check diagnostics with a few taps. This was years ahead of its time, but also way ahead of Buick's manufacturing capabilities. The car was built in a special craft center, basically a boutique factory set up to produce limited volumes with a lot of manual attention. The problem? That setup couldn't match the efficiency or quality control of traditional assembly lines. The Riotta's tech was buggy, the production slow, and the price tag a bit too high for what it offered. In total, just 21,751 Riottas were sold over 4 years. It wasn't a failure, but it never quite hit the mark. Today, it's remembered as an ambitious footnote, a digital dream that couldn't quite keep up with reality. But if Buick was ahead of its time, Mitsubishi was ready to throw in everything: turbos, electronics, and tech so dense it felt like a road legal science project. 9. Mitsubishi 3000 GT, 1990. If there were ever a car that screamed everything, everywhere, all at once, it was the Mitsubishi 3000 GT. When it hit the streets in 1990, it didn't just raise eyebrows. It fried them with a spec sheet that looked like it belonged to a prototype supercar. This wasn't just a fast coupe. It was a rolling tech showcase. You got twin turbochargers pushing a V6 to nearly 300 horsepower. But that was just the appetizer. It also had all-wheel drive, four-wheel steering, active aerodynamics, and an electronically adjustable suspension, all crammed into a single car. In the early 90s, this was basically rocket science with license plates. On paper, the 3000 GT was a masterpiece. It handled like it was glued to the road, delivered blistering acceleration, and looked like something straight out of a Tokyo arcade game. But all that tech came at a cost: weight, complexity, and long-term headaches. Every system added something, but also added something else to break. Maintenance was tough, parts weren't cheap, and the learning curve scared off all but the most dedicated enthusiasts. Still, the 3000 GT earned a loyal fanbase and eventually became a cult classic, loved for the very reasons that scared others away. It was brilliant, it was excessive, and it was very, very Mitsubishi. But before we wrap this up, let's look at one last curveball: a sleek, strange Subaru that tried to blend luxury, performance, and quirky design into one forgotten package. 10. Subaru SVX, 1991. By the early 90s, Subaru was known for rugged, practical cars, not bold experiments. But then came the SVX, a car that made everyone stop and ask, "Wait, that's a Subaru?" Penned by legendary designer Giorgetto Giugiaro, the SVX looked like a futuristic concept car that somehow escaped into production. Its most striking feature? The window inside a window design, an elegant but puzzling solution that let you lower a small inner pane while the outer glass stayed fixed. Cool? Absolutely. Practical? Not exactly. Under the hood, it packed a 3.3-liter flat-six engine, mated to an all-wheel drive system, classic Subaru DNA, but with a luxury twist. The ride was smooth, the power delivery refined, and the cabin surprisingly upscale. Subaru wanted to compete with the Toyota Supra and Nissan 300ZX, but there was a catch: price and identity. At nearly $25,000, the SVX was expensive for a brand known for practicality, and many buyers just didn't know what to make of it. Was it a sports car? A GT? A luxury coupe? Even Subaru didn't seem sure. Sales lagged, and by the time Subaru shifted focus to rally-bred beasts like the Impreza WRX, the SVX had quietly slipped into obscurity. Today, it's remembered as a beautifully oddball creation, one that showed Subaru wasn't afraid to take risks, even if it meant flying too close to the sun. But looking back at all these cars, from mechanical convertibles to digital dashboards, rotary engines to space-age suspensions, one thing becomes clear. These cars weren't just transportation. They were statements. Some changed the game, others crashed and burned. But every single one dared to be different. Which one blew your mind the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed the ride, hit like, subscribe, and ring that bell for more stories of the wildest machines ever built.